This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast.
I'm Vincent Price, and you're invited to my party in the house on Haunted Hill, where so far the ghosts have murdered only 7 people. So won't you come and make it 8?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I think I'm Alan Katz.
And I'm still Gil Adler.
After I parted company with the Tales from the Crypt creative team, they went on to make a series of horror movies under the banner Dark Castle. I know bits and pieces of the Dark Castle story, but I really don't know the whole Dark Castle story. So we're going to tell the Dark Castle story, if only so I can finally learn the Dark Castle story. I know Tales from the Crypt finishes. You all begin to do perversions of science. Where does the idea for Dark Castle come into it? Relative to perversions of science.
Well, Perversions of Science was a show that we thought might be a replacement or an additional show from Tales from the Crypt. We used artwork by Suriyami, a very famous Japanese artist, and we decided that would be our Crypt Keeper.
Seems like all men think about is sex. Not that I'm complaining, mind you.
Bob and I started working on what that show would be. And then the next thing I knew, Bob was telling me he's going to do Contact. And it was up to me to figure it out. And that's how that show, Perversions, got going. And then I wrote and directed the pilot. And we had a season of a dozen shows. During that time, Joel and Bob and I were talking about horror movies and how to make horror movies. And, you know, Dick Donner in the past had rights to the Hammer library. And he wanted to do horror movies with the Hammer library. And I don't think he really got around to it. I think he was so busy making big movies for Warner Brothers that he never really got around to doing it. However, we started talking about the Castle, the William Castle library. And wouldn't that be a good idea to take some of those IPs and make, remake them? And so we started looking into that and thought, yeah, this is interesting. This could work. And then we spoke to Terry Castle, who's William Castle's daughter.
And we will meet her shortly. Again, as she will contribute her part of the story to this story.
Yeah, and so we asked her what she thought of it. She thought it was a great idea, and so that was sort of the germ of it. And then we looked into which is always the problem. What's the first one you do? Because if the first one you do isn't great, then there's no second one. So we were trying to figure out, what would be the most interesting and accessible to our current audience on Tales from the Crypt. And so we came up with the first episode that was directed by, the first movie that was directed by Bill Malone.
Yeah, The House on Haunted Hill.
House on Haunted Hill.
And you all thought that would be the most accessible because...
Oh, gee, I don't even remember. I just think it was an easy story to tell. People get invited to a haunted house, and what the reason why they got invited to the haunted house is not the reason why they got invited to the haunted house. So it was very simple, and it was very clear. And it also gave us an opportunity to have about 5 or 6 people in the cast, which we thought, that's going to be interesting to cast, and that'll help sell it as well. And so it wasn't small, like a 3-character or a 2-character play. It was quite big in terms of scope, and it gave us 1 locations. So basically, we could build some of that and go to a location.
as you and Bob and Joel discussed the idea of a Dark Castle, okay, and it became Dark Castle, I assume, because it was going to be, the launching pad was the William Castle canon.
Yeah.
Was there an idea of the budget? How much these movies were going to cost?
No, because we still didn't know how we were going to finance it. And Joel really had that under control because he said, look, I'll get the money from Warner Brothers and we'll just figure it out. We'll just figure it out.
But there must have been some parameters to, you weren't going to make a $50 million, $60 million.
No, we weren't going to make a $1 million or $2 million picture, and we weren't going to make a $50 million picture. So we knew it was somewhere in there. Was it going to be 10? Was it going to be 25? Yes, somewhere in there. And that would be a conversation with both Warner Brothers, and at one point there was some conversation about independently financing them, which kind of disappeared very quickly because Warner Brothers stepped up right away.
So Warner Brothers was very confident in the people that they were about in this new venture and what this new venture wanted to make.
Yeah, they very much liked the team. They very much liked the concept, and they thought, we were being responsible in saying, oh, these are not going to be $50 million pictures. These are going to be, in the zone of what they can appropriately afford and make money on.
And Terry was very approachable.
Terry was great. Terry was very approachable, very collaborative. I would call her anytime I had a concern or an issue about the estate, similar to the way you and I dealt with Bill Gaines, in that we were very concerned that more than anybody, the partners, HBO, we were concerned Bill Gaines liked, and not only liked, but loved our Tales from the Crypt episodes, and that they were respectful of the original IP that he and his dad created. I felt the same way with Terry. I wanted to make sure that her father would be laughing and rolling around and saying, wow, what a great show.
Other people had approached, well, let me put it as a question. Had other people approached Terry?
I think she was approached earlier, before us, by different people. And I think our strength was, it was the three of us. We had Tales from the Crypt, which was running very, very successfully. Bob, was a very successful director, and Joel was a very successful producer. I think it made a lot of sense.
Surely. And it certainly turned out for a while. The first, as we know, all movies are a trial by fire. And House on Haunted Hill, as we will describe, was a trial by fire, but it did well enough that there was a second.
Yeah, the movies did very well. The Ghost Ship did very well as well. So we were moving along, and we made the first one in Los Angeles, and then we decided to make Ghost Ship in Australia, and I certainly, was interested in making more, but right after finishing Ghost Ship, I got a call from Lorenzo de Bonaventura, who was president of Warner Brothers, saying, we want you to do bigger pictures, come back, and we'll talk about that. And so when Gothika...
But Joel wanted you to do Gothika, because Gothika was going to be the next Dark Castle picture.
Yeah. And so I remember I got a call in Australia from Lorenzo, and then 15 minutes later, I got a call from Joel saying, I got our next movie. And I had to tell him, well, when I get back, they've already sent me a script and I'm looking at it. And that's a story for another time. But that was my last picture with Dark Castle, Ghost Ship.
And your last picture with Joel Silver, it turned out.
Yes, and probably my last conversation with Joel Silver.
And that is a podcast for another time. Actually, we've told that story, and we'll link that. We'll link to that in our notes on this one. But that said, here's the rest of it. First up, Terry Castle, remembering when she got the good news that she was remaking her father's movies.
Good news, and I have bad news. The good news is it's greenlit. You're making it. The bad news is you're making it with Joel Silver. I didn't know what he meant. I had no idea.
Yeah, you
But
were
the
back
most
in.
interesting part of the entire thing is now I know House on Haunted Hill is in the public domain.
Wow.
Like Warner's didn't even have the rights. I mean, it's in the public domain. They claim to have the rights, but they
Right.
don't. What happened is there's many different libraries because it was done with a library allied artists, and then that was bought and
Yeah.
many times. But
Oh,
no, I didn't own the rights to it either, Gil. It was literally in the public domain. Somebody just registered it incorrectly and it fell in the public domain. And Warner Brothers didn't I mean, they probably knew, but they didn't say anything. I mean, really, anybody out there, come on, let's do it. I want to do a prequel to it. I thought it was so well written. I mean, you can really tell that Rob White had a problem with women. But it's really well written. They're both really well written. And I thought Dick Beebe did a really good job too on House on Haunted Hill, the remake.
Yeah, I did too. It took a while to get there, though. I mean, with all of these kinds of scripts, to be respectful of the original, which we were really, really concerned about, and yet make it contemporary for an audience today, was not an easy task. And we went through a lot of different imaginations about how to treat character and how to treat women and how to treat the horror in so many different ways to get to where we finally got to.
Except for when we were shooting, I remember there wasn't really an end until somewhere in the middle. Yeah. That was another. We'll fix it with an ADR line.
Yeah, right. Well, in the sequel, we'll explain how it ended.
The reason I actually thought about House on Haunted Hill and remaking it is because I was living in New York and I would be going to these small mom and pop shops and like video shops. And I'd be like, House on Haunted Hill, top 3 video rental. I'm like, how is that possible? To me, that blew my mind.
To direct House on Haunted Hill, Gil pushed for and got Bill Malone. Gil started working with Bill way back on Freddy's Nightmares. Bill directed a couple of great Crypt episodes, including Only Skin Deep, arguably one of Crypt's best episodes ever. Bill was a huge fan of the original Castle movies. He understood them, understood how to make them work, and that made him a perfect choice to direct Dark Castle's first movie. House on Haunted Hill, how do you feel about that as you stand here today?
I'm proud of the work. It was a horrifying experience. That's the best way I can put it. It was absolutely a nightmare for me to make. But I'm proud of what I did with it and proud of our work together on it and so forth. But it was
what made it challenging?
There was a guy who who was large and in charge, who made life a living hell.
I wasn't that overweight.
What Joel Silver stories do you have? And everyone loves Joel Silver stories.
Well, I'll tell you, actually, Joel would want to have a discussion every lunchtime, and which I then lost my appetite. So I was like, and it's probably why I got really sick during the show. I don't know if you remember, I caught the flu and just was nearly.
I remember.
Yeah. And if you're a director, there's no such thing as taking time off for, being sick. There's just no such thing. You cannot be sick. So, I, patched myself together as best I could and continued. But no, I mean, Joel made it a living nightmare, to make that show.
Was he was challenging your decisions?
No, it's just, it was a climate of paranoia. Everyone that you talked to on that show, it was just nightmarish. It really was. I mean, I felt every day when I went to work, I felt like I was swimming in acid. That's the best way of putting it.
Yikes.
And I'm sure Gil was probably feeling the same way. I mean, it's,
yeah.
The
only redeeming part of that was Jeffrey Rush was such a great man to work with.
He was great. And The crew, no, the cast was great, and
Yeah.
you know, the crew was all on edge, and it was just you know, yeah, it was very difficult. Very difficult.
Why was the crew on edge?
I guess because Joel was doing the same thing to the crew that he was doing to, you know,
Yeah.
to myself and everyone else. So
You know, Joe would love to come in and rebel rouse. He would just like to stir it up and then walk
yeah,
away from
he'd
it.
say, "Oh yeah," he'd come in at lunchtime, go, "Oh, so and so doesn't like what you're doing," and da, da, da. And you know, he's try and start some argument or something like that.
Yeah, he would just stir it up. He used to do that all the time with us.
Yeah,
And it took me years to figure out, oh, that's what he's about. That's what he
Yeah.
wants to do. That gives him power.
Yeah.
yeah.
He's a chaos
Until
agent.
I realized that and then figured out how to work around that. It was painful. I used to have, terrible stomach problems and
Well,
feel like I'm going to throw up.
well, actually, I don't want to go into gory details. Let's say about a pint of blood came out of me during the making of that,
Wow.
and one day, and
Wow, really?
yeah, during one day, and I said, okay, yeah, and this was sort of towards the end of the shooting. I said, okay, all I need to do is survive this.
Jesus Christ.
Uh,
Oh my
Actually,
God.
my best moment on that entire film was we were shooting the scene down where it's when Chris Kattan is at the bottom of the hill. We shot it up by Griffith Park, and all the cast is coming up to go to the house. And it was the nighttime, and I remember Joel came up and he goes, "I'm not very happy about what's going on here, and I'm not happy with the way the show looks." And I looked at him. I said, "Joel, you know what? I've been thinking the same thing, you know." And I said, "You know, I'll tell you what. I'll stay on until you find another director." I said, I'll just you find another director, and I'll stay on till then." And he suddenly started backpedaling, you know, and then he pretty much after that left me alone until the end of the shoot. And then, of course, post-production, it was another nightmare. So,
Despite crappy reviews, pretty de rigueur for most horror movies, House on Haunted Hill did okay. Well enough to keep Dark Castle in business. So they went to work on 13 Ghosts, the next Castle remake, and then Ghost Ship, Dark Castle's first venture beyond remakes of Bill Castle films. The updated version of 13 Ghosts was going to be special effects heavy. While Steve Beck hadn't directed a feature film before Gil, Joel, and Bob hired him, he had directed plenty of commercials that relied on special effects. And he'd worked at ILM for George Lucas, where he did great special effects work on Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, The Abyss, and The Hunt for Red October. Dark Castle then decides to do 13 Ghosts. What drew you to Steve?
His experience and his background and the visual effects side of his capability. And we had a talk about the script. I remember and he had a vision and he had an idea about it. And, a lot of guys, when they're starting out in making movies, and they come in for an interview like that, they don't have that idea. They're just there to try to get you to convince you that, yeah, you should hire them to do the movie. But with Steve, he had a real idea about it. I mean, and that's indicative of those sets. I remember being afraid to go onto those sets because I was afraid I was going to walk into a wall or walk through the wall and either destroy my body or destroy the set.
How sacred was the original concept?
Well, I had this sort of philosophy, to be honest with you, that once you observe something for reference sake, it sort of settles into your psyche and you're not able to actually ever remove it enough to have it not influence what you're doing. So I didn't watch the original movie until we actually got done filming. But I had understood it was sort of semi-comical and it was semi-light in relationship to the other William Castle films. So we also were sort of taking it from a perspective like, this is about a little bit more than just a horror film. This is kind of it was a family suspense film at the end of the day. And what happens to one father when he loses control over, the care of his children. And so we wanted to keep it, so there was a balance that I wanted to strike, making sure that the humanity involved was well represented. So you would give a shit. you know, and it wasn't just a bunch of people running around with some guy with a big knife chasing you all over the place, which are very effective, and it's a very effective, you know, motif. But I felt that there was just something more in relationship to the original film that could be plumbed as well, and it could be, you know, made different, which just seems to have, you know, struck a chord. They wanted to do 3D as part of the experience. So when you put the glasses on
I see.
in the film, and actually you were already wearing stereographic glasses in the theater, when you put the glasses on in the story, suddenly the film would take on this ultra, you know, this extra dimension to it. But during the time, you have to keep in mind that 3D, of course, has become fairly prevalent now in theatrical, you know, release.
Yeah.
At the time, the same projectors weren't in any theaters. So in trying to go that route, almost every theater had to be retrofitted to 3D, and it just wasn't financially feasible. So that part got dropped, which is unfortunate, but that's okay. The film still played.
What he presented to us in terms of what he saw after conversations with you sort of blew us away. And we said, we really have to take this shot.
The house is a character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a character, sure.
Yeah. So, you know, how is the house represented on the page? You know, is it anything like on the page, like what was imagined? Because one thing about 13 Ghosts is the special effects are spectacular.
Well, you have to kind of keep in mind that we actually had a fairly limited effects budget. So most of it was practical or was just in camera.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The only effects that we had to really kind of hammer through were the exteriors of the house primarily. It just didn't exist. All the exteriors were, you know, just shot outside the windows on that huge set, that huge stage that we had in Vancouver. But for the most part, you know, all the stuff interior, it was all in camera, or it was, you know, it was handled physically.
You made this in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah, no, we had a great time. It was a great crew, worked their asses off. Yeah.
how long did production last?
Was that 9 weeks, Gil? Was that the shoot?
Gee, I don't remember. Was it 45 days? Was it that long?
I think it was somewhere around there.
Yeah.
So the first half of the set shooting was the house was made to look like the upper floors.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of that schedule, we blew the house up. And then while they were resetting the house, we went back to the auto graveyard and shot that sequence.
Oh, wow.
Came back, and then we did the basement after that, because the house had been redressed and reset for the basement. That was the lineage of effects. So yeah, that was a schedule. Something tells me it was about 9 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had 1 day of pickup shots, and that happened on September 11th, 2001.
Holy cow.
Yep, that was an interesting day.
Yet another date that will live in infamy.
Yeah.
J.R. Bourne gets definitely one of the coolest deaths of anyone in any movie anywhere. That is so fucking cool. God, I wish I'd thought of that.
I was just kidding before. A little lawyer humor.
Yeah, we enjoy cutting people in half, apparently. I think at the end of the day, you know, we saw
But that's such a particular way to slice. Look, you usually pick you right through the trunk, you cut them right in half, they fold in two, but to go to dissect them right down the middle from head to toe.
To go order, you know, we had to, you know, get it to go.
I hope the word delicious is not inappropriate.
We saw him the other day on Suits, and we were just shocked. He was still playing a lawyer. It was the funniest thing. It's like, hey, there's TR. So,
So just won't take a hint. Why do you think 13 Ghosts did not get the love it should have got? Because it's beginning to find love now.
It's got this huge cult following now. It's wild. I've gone to a couple of fan fests that were 13 Ghosts premieres, and just like these theaters are packed with people. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell why. Otherwise, I just think there's just, it just still holds together. It still resonates with people, and I think they appreciate the humanity again involved with it. So I can't explain much more. Gil, do you have any ideas why?
Not a clue.
If only
Not
we
a
could
clue.
figure that shit out, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I'm grateful that they won it, and I'm always asked about it. I'm always asked about the sets and about some of the shots that you created. But I don't, it befuddles me why people react the way they do sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. It's strange, but yeah, it seems to stick around.
Yeah.
The experience of making 13 Ghosts didn't quite sour you on the movie making business, so you said yes to making Ghost Ship.
I had an okay time on 13 Ghosts. I had fun. We had a good time up there. And so when Gil came to me with a second script, which was actually called Chimera, it was a great script. Yeah. The unfortunate thing that happened in that situation was that the studios demanded a complete rewrite after 9/11. And what was Chimera? It was a nautical tale, but it was far more like Treasures of the Sierra Madre.
Sure.
On a ship, and it was about a bunch of down on their luck kind of schlubs that find this ship and find this gold, and then they all start eyeing each other like, okay, and they start picking each other off, and you're not sure who's doing the picking. And there was really no supernatural component to it. And then when 9/11 happened, there was a note from the studios that said, we don't want sort of an anti-hero movie anymore. We want something that's got actually ends on a high note. So they went and made it supernatural and changed a bunch of stuff. And we still made the movie, but I think the original script was far better than the
Yeah, that kind of makes it makes it just a haunted ship.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Mm.
Kind of did, but you do what you're asked of, so you do.
Having been there and having been forced to do that, yeah, you sometimes the people in suits make the most terrible, I'll use the word creative decisions, and the repercussions don't fall on them.
Well, you could say that about almost every aspect of life. You just have to find a way of taking the opportunities that you're given and doing the best that you can with them, and try and move forward. I mean,
you are a much nicer person than I am.
At the same time, I have to be perfectly honest that, Gil watched my back so well on that production, and he took so many slings and arrows that were directed for us. It was, he was our
I
shield.
know nothing. What happened on this fucking movie? What start at the beginning?
At the end of the day, everybody was a little resentful that they shuffled the scripts the way they did and didn't tell anybody, and then we were just sort of given something completely different and saying Godspeed. And it was like, well, what happened to respect and collaboration and actually asking for our opinion?
Hey,
and we had that concern from the cast as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And also, I think before all this, when this also came about, when I first got my hands on the script, Lorenzo de Bonaventura, who was running the studio at the time, said to me, so we want to make this in Australia. And I'd never been to Australia. I barely knew where it was. And he said to me, do you know Australia? I said, no. He goes, I want you to go to Australia. That's all he had to say. And for a week. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to Australia for a week and they're paying for it. So I met the people from Village Roadshow down there. And within a week, we toured Melbourne and the Gold Coast and Sydney and all these other places. And, Lorenzo said, I want you to come back and tell me how to make the movie because we have a limited budget. And the night before I came back, I had no idea what to say. And I thought, my God, what am I going to say to him? I don't know. And then on the plane coming back, I'm getting more and more frightened about this meeting and came up with a couple of ideas. And then when I landed and I got into the car, the phone rang and it was Lorenzo saying, go home and take a shower, come right over to the studio. I want to see you right away. Do you know the story, Steve, at all?
No, this is all news to me.
So I go into his office and he's looking at me. He goes, so how do we do this? And I said, well, I have a couple of ideas, but I'm not sure you're going to like it. And he said, tell me. I said, well, I don't want to ever shoot on a boat, and I don't ever want to shoot on the water. And he looks at me and he goes, this is a movie called Ghost Ship, right? And I went, yeah. And he goes, but we're never going to be on a boat or on the water? I said, no. And he looked at me and he said, but will we think we're on a boat and on the water? And I said, of course, it's called Ghost Ship. It has to be. And he said, so you think you can make that happen? I said, I think that's the only way to try to make it happen. And in the room, to his credit, he said, okay, you know what the budget is, right? And he told me the number and I said, yeah. And he said, go make the movie. I think that's one of the few times that's ever happened to me where, and of course I walked out of his office going, holy shit, what did I just get myself into?
What was I thinking?
Yeah. How are we going to do this? We're never shooting on a boat and never shooting in the water.
I think we spent one day on the water filming the tug doing something,
Right.
just beauty shots for the opening sequence or something. And
well, we built this big barge.
Yeah.
And then we brought it down to the spit, this area called the spit in the water. Mm-hmm. And we shot that. And there was at one point, a guy has to jump off of of the ship into the water. And I think we got that there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was against just backing. It was nothing there. We put that all in later.
Yeah.
And yeah, we never shot on a boat. We never shot in the water.
Yeah.
And you also brought in a wonderful DP.
Yeah. Gil Tattersall, he did 13 Ghosts as well. So he was brought Dale down with us, and yeah, he just repeated his brilliance one more time. But in Australia, we had a great production designer down there, Grace. Remember Grace?
Yeah, Grace Walker.
Yeah, just a fantastic guy, and he really knew how to stretch the dollar. He just made amazing sets, and we had a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, but Gail, would look at me and I go, so Gail, we're not going to shoot on the water. We're not going to shoot on a boat. And he looked at me and said, and this is called Ghost Ship. I said, yeah, don't worry about that. Don't worry about the title. Title might change. Exactly. But to his credit, he figured it all out. He figured it out with you, how to get the reflections and how to make you feel like we're on a boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did a great job. As he continued to do. We worked together quite a bit, Gail and I.
Special effects,
Well, yeah, it's
right.
Yeah, right.
Aside from the fact that you weren't making the movie that you really wanted to make, what were the other hardships that you encountered down under?
There wasn't a lot. I mean, the crews down there were fantastic as well. And everybody got through all the days that we had to deal with. Again, Grace's contribution to the film was just amazing. We even did the visual effects down there as well. Dale Dale Good and his company were right there in Brizzy as well, and so we were kind of all wrapped up in one location, which made it very convenient. There really wasn't much more you could ask for. It happened, and it happened very well. The one thing that didn't happen on Ghost Ship that happened on 13 Ghosts is on Ghost Ship, Joel Silver was much more available. On 13 Ghosts, he was busy making The Matrix. So that was made for an interesting road.
That was to your advantage that Joel was otherwise engaged.
Yes. Yes, it was.
What was your experience of the Joel like?
It's an acquired taste, as people could confess. It's maybe having a little too many jalapenos in your salsa. It just depends. At the end of the day, Joel is a brilliant filmmaker, or was a brilliant filmmaker, and he should have probably spent a lot more time in the director's chair because he knew what the hell he was talking about. He was just extremely mercurial, and wore his passion on the sleeve, and you just had to, you're struggling to get through every day anyways, just to get to the end of the day. And, you knew that was waiting for you at the end of the day, that phone call. So But
I absolutely agree with you. Joel he's an old-fashioned impresario.
yeah, sure. Yeah.
And really, he is larger than life. He doesn't know how to live or be any other way. And yeah, and in terms of putting things together that really maybe don't belong together, he is magnificent at making the unexpected happen.
Yeah.
But he's part of the unexpected that's going to happen, and that's the problem.
Well, yeah. And I think, you just have to kind of live through it. And that was one of the things that I told myself was, if I was going to do this, do it with that type of sort of weight that sort of Damocles is hanging over you. If you think you're going to survive this industry.
When you say live through,
well, I lived through two of them.
But were there particular moments of Joel that you lived through that have scorched your memory?
Well, let's just put it helped build my appreciation for filmmaking and for understanding just how bloody lucky you have to be to sit in that chair and do the work that you do. It is capturing lightning in a bottle, and to have somebody with that amount of history behind him, which he definitely had, and continues to have. You have to pay attention to what he has to say, even though you're just slaughtered from the day. So it's just being able to, take it and keep going.
You have such a good temperament. It's amazing. It didn't get
20 years
crushed.
later, I'm really calm now.
Truly, yes. The distance helps. I know.
And so does Gil.
When
But
you
again, in Gil's defense, he really protected me when it was necessary, and I wasn't aware of it.
What was he protecting you from?
Well, we just had a lot of criticism from people that bought into one storyline that were now being led down another path, and they were like, what the fuck is this about?
So you had people who were married to the old story.
Well, they were sold that bill of goods.
Yeah.
That's what they signed up to make.
Right, but now they want the new to be the old, and this is an impossibility.
Well, it's not an impossibility. It was just it was just having to change without being asked. It's not a really convenient way of doing business.
Okay, so that was real. So the issue was really that no one was asked creatively.
Not particularly. No, it wasn't particularly put up for a vote. So you just make the best of what you have in front of you. And that's all I could ask of the cast, and that's what we got.
The movie that the cast agreed to was the old version.
Yeah.
All right. So all right. So everyone was suddenly handed, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it this way instead. And that's not the movie that anybody agreed to do.
Well, that's not what they signed up for.
Right.
Yeah.
But
they contractually had agreed to do whatever they had to do.
They had agreed to do a movie by that name. And yes,
that
and
changed too.
Well, okay, they had signed the deal, and damn if Joel wasn't holding them to it.
Well, again, I'm sure somebody was holding Joel's feet to the fire too, to be perfectly frank.
I'm not so sure about that, but he certainly was holding our feet. And I remember you and I were dancing as fast as we could.
Oh, like you don't know, dodging arrows from every direction at the time. But hey, we got it done.
Yeah, we got it done. And in reference to Joel Allen, I worked with Joel about 13 or 14 years consecutively, and we made a lot of product together. We made a lot of television. We made a lot of movies together. And our relationship was always one of argument. We only argued. In fact, we would have an argument about, I would say, Joel, we're only arguing. Why can't we have a conversation? And he would say, that's how we speak to each other. It's a little bit raised voice, but and I would say, no, I want to have a regular conversation, because we can't have a regular, and we would argue about arguing.
Yeah.
But it lasted like 13 or 14 years. And I sometimes look back on that and think, how did I survive? And yet I think I survived because we're both very passionate about what we wanted to do.
Right. Yeah.
And we both respected that passion in each other.
So Ghost Ship was the last movie you made with Joel.
Yeah, because as soon as we finished that movie, I was about to come back. I was going to Tahiti for a week and then going back to LA, and I got a call from Lorenzo, and he said, I want to talk to you when you get back. I've got 3 scripts here, and I want you to read them and tell me which one you want to do. And
was that Valkyrie?
no. One was Constantine.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
One was the one that Stallone did, not the Untouchables, or
Actually, it's The Expendables, which didn't get made until 2010, 5 years after Constantine got released.
and a third one. And I hung up with him. He said, I'm gonna get you the scripts as soon as you get back, and then come in. And I hung up with him. 5 minutes later, Joel called, screaming and yelling at me, you're making this movie called Gothika. That's our next movie. And I go, Joel, I just got off the phone with Lorenzo. And he said, you're not going to work in this town again unless you work for me. I'm going to make sure that you'll never work at Warner Brothers, let alone any other place. And on and on and on. And I got really pissed at him, and I, told him what I thought. And then when I came home, I read the 3 scripts, and I just said, can we talk a little bit more about Constantine?
Yeah, which was a great movie.
And then that was the next movie I made. And then from that, I made Superman, but it was also with Warner Brothers.
Right.
So, and Joel was really, really pissed off at me for many years. I think he probably still is.
The one thing that kind of really pissed me off about Joel being site specific is that he wouldn't pay for your car service to take you to the premiere of Ghost Ship.
Right.
And when he did that, I stayed for the opening credits, and then I left the movie. I didn't stick around.
Did you really?
I did not stick around. I was just like, I was so pissed for somebody being so goddamn petty.
Wow. That was Joel's fuck you to you because you'd walked away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just, after all the shit that we went through for him on Ghost Ship, it was just like, you got to be fucking kidding me.
And much of it he didn't even know about. I mean, much of it I didn't even tell him or bother to tell him.
Yeah, I mean, but still, to pay for a car service was the deal. I mean, it's just absurd, absurdly petty.
Yeah,
absurdly petty. After all, not only what Gil has done for me, but what he did for Joel over all those years was substantial.
Mm-hmm. So Gil went his way, and Dark Castle went its way. Gil made Constantine, and then Batman Returns, and then Valkyrie. All big Warner Brother tentpole movies. All made money. Joel and Dark Castle, they went and made Gothika in Montreal with a $40 million budget. It did okay, ultimately bringing in just north of $141 million. But the reviews were brutal, picking on the movie's preposterous plot, bad dialogue. But hey, Roger Ebert liked the movie. He gave it 3 out of 4 stars. He agreed that it was preposterous, but also enjoyable on its own terms. After that, Dark Castle kept making movies, but with less and less direct involvement in their actual production. Dark Castle might have had a hand in the movie Orphan's development, or they might have just passed it along from point to point while snipping off a piece of ownership, as companies do. They tried to be faithful to the original mandate and remade a non-Castle oldie, House of Wax, and then a sequel to House on Haunted Hill. House of Wax did okay. House on Haunted Hill, the sequel, well, it did scary little business. From there, the budgets and the box office got smaller and smaller, as did their actual involvement in the making of any of these movies. Their last produced credit is on the movie Orphan First Kill in 2022. I'd be willing to bet you that producer title is entirely titular. As for the here and now, well, in theory, but only in theory, Dark Castle is still a going concern. But I wonder how long it's been since anyone actually worked at Dark Castle. Or how long it will be till the Dark Castle finally goes dark. We'll see you next time. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast. Follow them for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrific Crypt content.